WOKD, Winter Garden, Orlando.
Welcome to another edition of Real Family Talk. Hello. This is your host, J Real. Hope everybody's having a great evening out there on Tuesday. This is Real Family Talk. Welcome to another evening, Real Family Talk, people. We thank you for joining us. Let's get right into it this evening. How you doing over there, Mr. Jeremy?
I'm doing good as always. Hey, we got to send a congratulations out to brother Chris Shaw. They said, hey, heard he had a baby today.
Oh,
a baby girl.
A baby girl.
Yes.
Congratulations,
Lady D told
Chris
me.
Shaw. All right.
Congratulations.
I'm a baby girl.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. How you doing tonight, Miss McCrae?
I'm all right. I'm blessed. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. And how we doing, Miss Monica?
Doing wonderful.
Excellent. Let's get right into it this evening. 407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680 is the number. So we're going to talk about Trayvon Martin and kind of reflect where we are after a year in a moment. But before we get there, big news happened over the weekend with one of our favorite schools around here at Real Family Talk anyway. I don't mind saying that. But at FAMU, they had some issues this weekend, or at least some students at FAMU had some issues this weekend. They decided to up the charges on the students, or at least 12 of them, in the hazing death case to manslaughter. Right? Is that right? Mm-hmm. Manslaughter, right? Mm-hmm. Led by, I hear, Jeff Ashton. Everybody knows Jeff Ashton, the man who tried to convict Casey Anthony, but just didn't quite make it. But but yeah, so they're going to manslaughter. You know, how you guys feel about that one? I'm a little torn on that one, on the manslaughter. I just think, you know, I think it's a reach for sure, just because, one, the intention was not there, and then two, there was more than likely voluntary participation in the event. And so you kind of knew what you were getting into, although, of course, you obviously don't know the outcome, but you knew what you were getting into. And so to say now everybody involved, or at least 12 people involved, should get manslaughter and now possibly face, you know, a felony conviction on a manslaughter charge, which pretty much is a wrap for any kind of great career, you know. I don't know about that one. I'm a little torn on that one. I'll let you guys speak. What do you guys think?
I totally agree with you. I think it's a reach. They're trying to prove a point. They're trying to make an example. But again, he was, and anybody in that situation, they were willing participants. He wasn't forced on that bus. He wasn't forced to participate. And I'm not being insensitive to his death. No one wanted him to die. But to say that these guys intentionally went out to kill this kid, it's too much. It's too much. And Jeff Ashton, you know, he hasn't learned his lesson of overreaching with these charges.
Like, just go with what you can prove, man.
Just go ahead.
Just go with what you can prove, man. Hazing, you can knock that out 2 days. Hazing, guilty, and be done with it. You know what I'm saying? Now you're going to manslaughter. Now the trial's going to last a couple of weeks. You know, you're going to have to bring in all kind of witnesses and expert opinions. I don't know, man. Yeah. I just say go with the easy one and call it a day. Are you going to say something, Miss Monica?
I agree with you all as well. I think it's a little extreme, and I know that this isn't probably the first incident. I know it's not the first incident, you know, in our college histories of people dying from hazing incidents, and so I haven't ever recalled anyone trying to stretch out for manslaughter in any of those cases. So I'm not quite sure where his reasoning is behind that. I'm certainly know that don't believe that they, like Ms. McCrae said and you said as well, that they intended on him internally bleeding to death. I just think it's really extreme. I don't know if he's really going to make it with that, but
Guess we'll have to find out sooner or later.
Their
right?
lives are already torn apart, these kids. So, they are suffering consequences, maybe not to the full extent, but I'm sure they are suffering with the guilt as well.
Definitely. But I just a note, and I can't, don't quote me on this, so you guys will look this up for me. But I don't think manslaughter has any kind of intent associated with it. I think manslaughter is one of those things where if you in the pursuit of some kind of action against another individual or assault against another individual, if that person dies, then that qualifies as manslaughter, if I'm not mistaken. It's not about what your intent was. It was just the fact that you guys had some kind of assault or altercation, and then it resulted in a death. Qualifies or gives the opportunity for manslaughter, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. If you could look that up for me real quick, just to verify. I don't want to be saying wrong information, but I know I've read that before, and I believe that's about the case.
There's a killing of a human being by act, procurement, or culpable negligence of another without lawful justification. And what is it, according to previous chapters, manslaughter. A felony is a second degree. A person who causes death of any elderly person, disabled adult by culpable negligence. A person who causes death to any person under the age of 18 by negligence. A person who causes death through, basically you got to be negligent in the death. You know, like so, it doesn't necessarily have to prove intent.
Right, exactly. So for all intents and purposes, you know, I would say there's at least a window of opportunity here, but I still just disagree with the charge. I think it's just a reach, and to find 12 people that will convict 12 other people, right? Because you know they're all going to have separate trials. So that means you got, 144 people that, that's 12 times 12, just for those that didn't know.
Good job, J-Real.
12 separate trials on manslaughter. You got to convince 144 people that all of these people are guilty of manslaughter. Just come on. Statistics say that's not going to consistently happen. You might get one or two, depending on the people you bring in, but you're not going to get it consistently. And quite frankly, in my opinion, if you can't get it on all 12, then you don't get it on one. But we'll see how it goes. This is the court of law. Anything happens once those doors close and the people start thinking independently of what the law actually says. So we'll see what happens in that. 407-894-1680. One other comment before I jump to Trayvon. Is anybody feeling like Casey Anthony is getting the O.J. Simpson treatment right now? And here's what I mean by that. So in the O.J. case, of course, everybody felt like the wrong charge was laid down. In Casey Anthony's case, everybody felt like the wrong charge was laid down. So when they went to, in O.J.'s case, it wasn't a defamation lawsuit, it was a civil lawsuit. Pretty much, you knew going into the civil lawsuit he was going to get convicted.
Yeah.
You knew pretty much going in he's going to get convicted. Right, wrong, indifferent. He was going down for something. You know what I'm saying? If we couldn't get you in jail, we're going to take that money from you. And I still don't think they got that money, but at least they won the case. And so now, of course, in Casey Anthony's case, she's going to court to try and see if she can file bankruptcy. But I kind of feel like it's the same thing in the sense that I don't care what she says, because she's pretty much said she has no money, she has no book deal, she has no movie deal, nothing's in the works, But I don't believe anybody believes that story. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so ultimately, I think they're going to say, no, you can't file bankruptcy. What's even more funny to me, one of the creditors in the bankruptcy file is Jose Baez. What? Like Jose Baez, you knew when you took that case she ain't had no money. Yeah. Now you suing after the fact? Like, are you kidding me? And then not only that, Jose Baez know where she at. He know what kind of money she working with. Like, like what's going on, Jose Baez? Like, what kind of game are you playing?
I think he just covered his tracks. So when the book deal when she does sign the book deal, did she make any money off the movie? Was it Lifetime?
Nah, she ain't make no money off that movie.
But when she
the only person made money so far is Jose Baez.
so once she does.
And Jeff Ashton. Don't forget about Jeff Ashton.
When she done the book deal and do the interview, whenever it happens, because at some point it's probably going to happen. I guess he just putting his name in the hat to make sure he get his money.
Is that what's going on?
Yeah, he just recover, just in case. This is a just in case.
Just in case.
I don't need it, but just in case.
Just in case you get a little bit of money.
Yeah.
I'll just get me a couple of dollars back. And he the one running around the country. He's like a legal expert now. I bet you his phones are ringing off the hook at the Jose Baez law firm or whatever it's called. But you know, he's got all kinds of credit. He's probably made $2 million since the trial. But yeah, I think that's kind of funny. I just think she's going down simply because we didn't get you here, so we'll get you there, and we'll stick it to you however we can. That's what they like to do, man.
Yeah.
That's what they do, especially
exactly
in
what they do.
these kind of cases like this, man. But we'll see what happens, man. Moving on, let's get to the topic of the night, Trayvon Martin. 407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680 is the number. So, of course, last week Tuesday, marked the year since Trayvon was shot and killed by George Zimmerman. And I didn't know this until I was reading some articles, but I guess on February 5th, he actually turned 18 as well. So he would have been 18 had he lived. But yeah, he was shot and killed as of last Tuesday. Of course, around the country, different vigils were going on. His parents were actually at a vigil in New York, apparently attended by Jamie Foxx and Michael Eric Dyson. The two of them spoke, as well as the parents, they say. And they ended it, they say, by, I guess there were candles lit, and they ended it by blowing out the candles at the time that they called his death. Is how they ended it. It's kind of touching if you think about it. 407-894-1680. But you know, in the aftermath, of course, a lot of people are also reflecting. You know, what does his death mean now, a year later? What has changed now, a year later, as a result of his death? I'm gonna let you guys comment first. I got some comments, but I'm gonna let you guys comment first. What do you guys feel has changed, or has anything changed since the death of Trayvon Martin a year later? Call us. Tell us what you think. Again, 407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680 is the number. You guys got any comments on that?
I really don't feel like very much has changed, to be very honest. I mean, I haven't noticed anything. I feel like there was a lot of protests, there was a lot of demonstrations and various things at the very beginning, and much like most social, the media making it, very obvious at first, now it's kind of died down and people don't really do anything about it, that they, much like what we generally do with anything. We make a lot of noise about it at first, and then after some time, we go on about our business, and then, no one ever makes sure that laws are being placed. No one follows through with, getting in touch with our government officials and making some changes, that we just, we jump on the bandwagon and then we watch whatever else has gone viral and follow that bandwagon. So, I mean, it's unfortunate. And we've made a lot of, there was a lot of protesting, a lot of demonstration, and it looked like a lot was going to change. But I don't really think there has been since then in a year.
No change, Miss Monica says. No change whatsoever. What about you, Miss McCurry? What you think?
I have to agree. The killings are still happening, unfortunately. And even within the year that Trayvon's incident happened, we had at least 2 or 3 more incidents that were similar to that, and they will continue to happen, unfortunately, until these laws like the Stand Your Ground, or if this goes to trial and he is found guilty, maybe that may start a little something and deter people from acting out. But I don't know. It's a long way to go.
Long way to go. 407-894-1680 is the number. You got any comment over there, Jeremy?
Yeah, I agree, because until a result of this trial happens, I don't believe anything is going to change as far as perception-wise, at least amongst our community. Depending on the outcome of the verdict is when you're really going to see, okay, now something's different. I mean, you know, obviously, the city of Sanford has hired a new police chief. He is black. Will that change some things in Sanford? I'm sure it'll help. You know, if nothing else, it'll change the perception. You know, at least I know the black community in Sanford will feel a little better. You know, but outside of that, I don't think things changed.
Okay. All right. So nobody thinks anything's changed. You know, I'd agree with you. I don't see any changes. One thing that I was reading, I read an article, Roland Martin, you know, I think he seems like in the last year he's really gained a lot of prominence as far as black media is concerned. But he wrote an article about it as well. And I'll talk about some of the things he thinks has changed. You know, one, obviously, Trayvon Martin's parents, Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin. Sorry, lost their names for a second there. But Sabrina Fulton and Tracy Martin, obviously, they have spent, you know, basically the entire year, you know, traveling around doing the circuits. You know, they've been to the Congressional Black Caucus. They've been to the NAACP. They went to the Image Awards and spoke at the Image Awards. They've spoken in front of the Florida legislator. So there are people, certainly his parents have been advocating for changes. But, you know, advocating for changes is great. But what is the change that's happening? And when you look at that, you know, there's really no changes happening. If you look at the Stand Your Ground law in Florida, you know, right after it happened, Governor Scott put together the panel to examine the Stand Your Ground law and what it meant and how it's being applied. And ultimately, at the end of that, they basically said, I don't see anything wrong with this law. So, you know, so that didn't change. There are groups that have, obviously the NRA, one of those groups that have been advocating on behalf of creating these laws in different states. One victory Roland claims is that one of those groups, they called ALEC for short, have essentially sort of stopped their efforts in pushing this Stand Your Ground law into new states. And so he advocates that as a great change due to the Trayvon Martin situation. But that's, you know, that's one of those changes that you don't see. You know what I mean? So it has no effect on people. And I think ultimately, if change is going to happen, it has to touch people. And that's the change that I don't see. I don't see it touching people. Like Miss Monica said, there were rallies. You had NBA teams participating, putting on hoodies when it first happened. But, you know, have they done anything since? Of course not. You know, and I'm not saying that they have to or they're wrong because they haven't, but that's the reality. You know, they haven't addressed it again. And yeah, there's people speaking at the rally, but, you know, the rally that in New York was described as being, you know, much less than what it was a year ago, which, again, is expected because it's a year later. And I disagree. I don't think this trial is going to solve anything. It might put a few smiles on people's faces, or it's going to put a few sad faces on a couple of faces as well. But I don't think it's going to change anything. I think the change comes when the mindset of America changes. And a trial is not going to do that. A trial is only going to make things worse, if you will, because you're going to have those, or you got your African Americans or your blacks on one side who are anticipating a guilty verdict, and then you have the advocates, if you will, on the other side, or gun owners on the other side saying, hey man, this thing sounds like a clear cut case, you know, for stand your ground or at least self-defense. And I think no matter what side wins, the other side is going to go, you know, hey, you know, they got this or they got that, so that it's only going to infuse more divide as opposed to solve anything. And so it's going to be an interesting trial to see what happens. I've gone on record to say I don't think anything's going to happen with this case. I think he's going to get off on self-defense, no problem. You know, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks before it happens, but I think that's what's going to ultimately happen here. But until the mindset of people change, the mindset of America change, the realization of America to realize that race relations in this country are, you know, at best, 5% better than they were 50 years ago. When we get to that point, I think that's when we'll see change. And I think that's the ultimate point that has been missed in all of this, is that, we got this black president out there. Of course, people aren't racist anymore. They voted in a black man into the presidency. And, he said a bunch of good stuff. And the other guy was pretty much a computer. So it wasn't like he did something. He went against an old guy that was in the retirement home and a guy that acted like a computer. Let's give him some credit here. But I'm just saying, until we recognize our race relation problem, I think that's when we'll see change in America. And until then, status quo. Nothing's changed until we can acknowledge that point, not from just the black community, but from all communities. That's my point on that. You guys have a comment on that? 407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680 is the number. Whoa, you guys went silent on me for a second there. Is that an agreement silence? I mean, what's going on, people? Talk to me here. Don't leave me hanging out there. Is this a racial issue that until America accepts its racial divide, we're going to be stuck in this place?
I think so. Racism is still very much alive and well. It may not be as blatant as it used to be, but it's definitely still there. Definitely. We see issues like related to it every day. There's a story about some type of racial crime, racial injustice, something related to race, black and brown people. It's there, unfortunately. Hopefully, as the generations continue to grow, we can get rid of it, but I don't know.
Well, let me ask you this, piggybacking on that. Do you see anything happening that's going to encourage change in the future? Currently, do you see anything? Do you notice anything happening within the communities that lead you to believe that a change is possible or coming?
I mean, I am hopeful that there are some changes, because if you look at the generations of kids today, if you look at their friends, they have a nice mixed group of friends. And if that continues to go, excuse me, as they become adults and then have their own kids, the hope is that we all will become more inclusive and not exclusive. But we're still segregated in many ways. I mean, look at your Sunday mornings. That's a prime example. Now, although there are some churches that are non-denominational and have a mix, but for the majority of our community, we go to black churches, then there are white churches. So it's still a delicate issue.
Delicate indeed. Delicate. Were you going to say something, Miss Monica?
I think that, hopefully, as Ms. McCray was saying, that throughout the generation that the blend of cultures is much more accepted, and you can definitely see that our younger generation is more accepting of diversity in other cultures and the way that we all integrate together. But I feel like racism is just like this little virus that somehow still finds its way throughout different things. And so that's the challenge. It can still spread throughout a younger, more accepting generation. So that's the only thing. But hopefully, they are more well-rounded in the end.
All right, we got a call on the line. How you doing tonight, Jimmy?
All right, how are you all?
I'm doing all right. What's your comment tonight, sir?
It's just one of the things like with the Trayvon Martin situation. Sanford was always racially divided. You go on one side of the street, it's all black, and one side it's all white. So where does the togetherness come into that aspect? So what do we do in order to bridge the gap? Where does it come? What do we have to do to make that thing happen? Because we have to do something. I mean, prayer does one thing, but us as people need to do something to make things happen so that we can bridge that gap. So what do we do, and how do we do it?
That's a good question. One of the things that I always that I think helps, one of the things I strive to do is because people tend to not cross the lines, if you will.
Right.
I think you have to take that initiative to help them cross the line.
Right.
So so as you help them cross the line, and what I mean by that is, let's say you say one side is black and one side is white. So as the black person, take that initiative and then begin to engage the white person. So that, because a lot of times, people don't interact because they figure you got to be completely different than me. We can't have that much in common. And so as a result, you tend to stick with the people that you think you had a bunch in common with. And so, bridge the gap. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of times they're not going to do it. So take the initiative yourself. Go out, reach, befriend,
Right.
so to expand your community so that your community isn't just one side of the street. And then, again, does that happen overnight and then magically the whole world has changed? No.
Yeah.
But it's that slow step. It's that slow step to saying, I'm opening the door, here's the open door, walk through it. And sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. But that's all you can do. Because having forums where we discuss race and the majority of the people there are black, that don't do nothing.
Okay, now, one thing that I can say, I grew up, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I grew up in a race to where we were all one. It wasn't like you're black, we're white, I didn't know anything about racism. I heard about it and I knew about it, but living in Cleveland, we didn't have that because, I had blacks and whites and we all got along together. But coming down south, it was a whole different atmosphere. So I was like, wow, it blew my mind because I didn't understand why was it so that bad. Well, I mean, what was it?
You know what it is? When you grow up in the South, you get used to hearing all the stories, which puts you on the apprehensive, so that you become, it's almost it's a distrust that you have, naturally, you know what I mean? Because you grow up with it. And then you get to experience different things. And then as you experience them, it only helps to cement that. And then at the older and older you get to that point where, again, you close the door on walking across the street, And so that's what happens in the South, because you hear about it, one, because it's talked about enough that it's prevalent in your mind. And then two, as you grow older and get used to it and kind of experience it yourself a little bit, you begin to close that door and you go, it's not even worth it, because even if I try, I'm not even sure it's real anyway. So why try? And that's what we have to, again, that's what I say. That's what we have to get over. You got to try, because meeting that new black guy is no different than meeting that new white guy, really, at the end of the day. And sometimes
it's no difference. I mean,
exactly.
If you look at it, you have to persevere and keep going on, despite how it may seem or look or feel or whatever. You still have to keep going on, because we make life what it is, and then we go from there.
Definitely, because no matter what like you say, you grew up in Cleveland, and there was no color line, if you will, and that's awesome. But I grew up, I'm gonna tell you, I grew up in Orlando, and I'm not gonna say the color line was bright, but but I knew it existed. But I knew it existed, you know what I mean? And in my own personal life, I strive to. I try and open as many doors as possible. That's what I try and do, because at the end of the day, that's the only way you're going to break that barrier. That's the only way you're going to be able to really open up a real conversation with people, because they got to get to know you before they tell you the truth anyway. So open that door, and then you can get some truth out of them. And then if you need to correct that truth, and not be offended by ignorance, And that's another thing that we have to do. We have to stop being so offended by ignorance. And we do that a lot, You look at a lot of your you know, I call them, you know, popular television show hosts and even radio show hosts. A lot of them speak out of ignorance. Then they're really trying to be racist. You know what I mean? So you gotta recognize you gotta recognize ignorance for what it is, and then address ignorance and stop. You know, you're just a racist, so I can't listen to you. Nah, help him out. He don't know. I mean, honestly, a lot of them just don't know. You know, it's hard to believe. It's 2013, and yes, older white men just don't know. They don't get it. So, you know, and you have to.
They don't want to care to give it.
That maybe that may be some truth. But hey, if you can't, you know, somebody's got to open that door. You know what I mean? And maybe it's you, maybe it's not you. But a lot of it is just ignorance, man. And you got to get over it and have that discussion. And you got to get used to the idea that the discussion ain't going to sound exactly like you thought it was going to sound. Some of it's going to sound kind of ignorant, and you're going to have to get around that and then start to really address issues.
But I think the one thing is that we will persevere regardless of the situation, the circumstances, because we have no other choice. We've done it over so many generations, so now we're doing it, and we're going to persevere regardless of how the situation may come.
Right, because that's what we do. As black folks.
That's exactly what we're going to do.
That's exactly what we do as black folks, man.
Yes, most definitely, sir.
I appreciate the comments, man.
To you.
You too, sir. Thank you, Jay.
All right, you all have a good evening.
You too.
Good night.
That's a good brother right there. With an awesome name, too, by the way.
One thing to kind of piggyback off of what you all were talking about was, I know as a community as a whole, both black, white, you know, Hispanic, Asian, Indian, what have you, all the ethnicities that we have, and especially in Orlando, it's very, very diverse. I think that we really need to start opening up the discussion way when we have small children about race and about diversity and you know, opening themselves up to those things. I can say that I had a very unusual experience many years ago. I was doing a psychological evaluation on a young child in a pretty prominent area, and it was a Caucasian girl, little girl, 3 years old, and she was talking to me and didn't really say very much about race at all until all of a sudden, just out of the blue, she said, "Why are you so dark?" And I just was caught off guard. Like, I really, for a good minute, really didn't know what to tell her. I just like, wow, she's never even seen an African American. She probably has no idea. She has absolutely no idea. She really wants to know why I am so dark.
Right.
And I'm really not that dark.
Right.
You know, and so that goes to show that, you know, that children we're not talking to our children about the different, you know, not that it's really different, but that, you know, this person is an African American, but they're much like us, or, you know, they just have a different skin color, but they have very similar, you know, interests. They're no different than anyone else, you know, and not really discussing it at all. So she doesn't even have a concept of, you know, the differences. So when she grows up, she's just going to adapt to whatever anyone else is telling her about, you know, an African American person, rather than, you know, being, you know, told that it's okay, being told that, you know, hey, you know, these are just people that you know, she's just going to adapt whatever her parents tell her, or whatever the other people in the community tell her, rather than being aware of, you know, different people out there in the community. So it was just kind of an interesting, just wanted to share that we don't talk a lot about race, you know. We have kind of the nicknames about different things and, you know, around kids, and we don't just say, you know, well, this is a Caucasian person, but they're not much different than us. You
know, but on that note, Miss Monica, my thing is, I don't necessarily think you have to discuss race when race is an issue for you, in the sense that if you're a black person and your child's never met anybody other than a black person, then perhaps you have to discuss race with them to know that, hey, there's going to be some different colored people in the world, you know. But if we can get to that point where your circle is already diverse, you know, a discussion on race is not necessary, because I'm now used to everything else. You see what I'm saying? Because that's what we need. We don't need races. We need people,
right?
You know, and so if you can get to that point where you can just have people in your life and not races in your life, I think that's the point where the change begins, and I think that's part of our problem, is because we are so closed on our circles, and that's black people, white people, and all races. You see it all the time. You talked about Ms. McCrae mentioned earlier. The kids and seeing the change in the kids. One thing I know, I have teenage boys now, and they've tried to do their little girlfriend thing or whatever you want to call it at teenage years, but I saw it there. Because a couple, at least one of them has had issues trying to, get a girlfriend outside the race, so even there, it's again, it comes from home, and home said, hey, you don't bring no little darky boys or black boys, however they described it when they said it to her. I don't know. They might have said Negroes. I don't know what they said, but they made the point that you didn't bring that home to mommy and daddy. That wasn't cool, if you will. And so he had to learn at the age of 15, 16 that, the world is not all lovely and beautiful and smiles as you think it is, which, something I preach all the time anyway. But, so I don't necessarily know that change is going to happen in the youth until, I think the youth they have to be shown that example, because even, at the end of the day, you're not what you are at school, you're what you are at home. And if at home it's still secluded, then regardless of how you grow up, and when you go back, when you grow up and you become that adult, more than likely, at some point, even if it's not in the beginning, at some point it's going to be just that. It's going to be what you saw at home. And I think ultimately, again, that's where the change has to happen. It has to happen in homes. It has to happen. We need to see others in our homes. And we need our kids to see others in our homes to know, it's not, everybody ain't the boogeyman, if you will. Every white man ain't out to get you, if you will. Some of them are, but there's some brothers out there that's out to get you. Mm-hmm. So, but they need to know from a home perspective, man, my dad had a good friend named Bob, and Bob was awesome. You know what I'm saying? Bob helped me get a job or whatever. They need that experience so that they can know, and it breaks that barrier, because they saw it at home. That's the point.
Right. And I agree with that. I was just saying that I think we don't have enough of that exposure, and I think that we don't really, they're, like you said, that they're surrounded by mostly what they see at home. And if you don't, there are a lot of, stereotypes and things that people have at home. And if they don't break those stereotypes and they don't stop doing those things at home, then, that people are going to remain closed-minded. And so it's best for us to really talk at home about being open to things, rather than just saying, oh, well, there's no darkies here, or what have you. No we don't do the darkies or whatever. So, to say, look, you can go and see whatever race, or, you can date whatever race you want, and that is fine. And opening that discussion up, because I feel that a lot of people really don't talk about race until someone feels that there's been some line crossed, like with your sons, maybe. They probably never experienced that until they ran into it. So it would be best if we all discussed, these are some things that could happen, but at the same time, it's wrong, and you shouldn't handle those things that way.
Trust.
And,
Trust. I had that conversation. I had that. The funny thing was I warned him ahead of time. I was like, hey, you can do what you do and date these other little girls or whatever. But just know that y'all may be buddy at school, and y'all may be the best of friends at school, but when she go home, they may or may not. They may or may not be cool with that. And like I said, he found out that daddy wasn't a liar. And as pro-black as daddy seems to be sometimes, he does know something. But
and it's unfortunate. I mean, it really is unfortunate. I've had a few, very unusual circumstances going to a mostly Caucasian college that, I have always been one of the very few African-American students, period, not even just female, but period. in most of my classes. And so to go to a school where I was asked if I was the maid rather than a student.
Wow.
And so
And that was
I'm
in
saying
what
that
year?
coming at, that was in,
That was-
well, then I'm going to tell my age.
No, you're
But
not.
very recently, I mean, not extremely
Just tell
recently,
her the
but
year it
within the
was.
last 15 years, I'll say that. So, I'm not extreme.
Was it after the year 2000?
It was after the year 2000.
They
It
thought you
was.
was a maid.
Yeah, they asked me if I was part of the maintenance crew and didn't actually wait to ask the question or the request that they had. They just kind of had a breath and just said, well, I need you to do this. And I stood in the elevator, had on, a sweater vest and, I did not look like anyone with maintenance uniform attire.
Right.
And was astonished at what was being asked of me and told them I'm a student. And they looked at me like I was saying that in Vietnamese and walked off, didn't even apologize. Actually repeated, you're a student, and just walked off.
Yes, I can read.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
can read.
I can read.
My master was good to me.
So I guess, my experiences have been a little extreme, and that's why I guess I'm so much into, like, you have to talk about these things because people are there are some very ignorant people out there. And so you have to prepare your kids, like you were saying, and we have to, we have to just talk about it and just put it out there. It's unfortunate, but in the South, it happens. Yeah. And I don't even know if this person is very Southern. I mean, it was in a Southern state, but I don't know much about that person. So
You go. It is up the street. Wasn't it? You can go ahead.
well,
and
we
say it.
won't. I'm very proud of my alma mater.
About
But
15
that
minutes
was
away
not.
from the
station.
That was not much. That wasn't a very
You
proud
can go
moment
ahead.
Don't take
there.
that long. You get all the light.
Right.
407-894-1680 is the number. 407-894-1680. Here's the other issue too. And we talked about this here on the show. The bigger issue related to this case was more than likely some of the anger that was probably displayed on behalf of Mr. Martin, which certainly didn't help the situation. And that's one thing that I don't really see discussed at all, because and that's a big problem in a lot of young black males. They're very angry, and that anger issue really isn't curbed, and I don't think it's curbed. I mean, we can kind of look to Chicago, sort of the shining star, if you will, of angry young black males right now. Over 500 deaths in the year 2012. So far this year, there are about 56 deaths in the city of Chicago, and that's the city of Chicago. So you think about that, and that's that issue that's that underlying issue. What's really being done to sort of curb that anger, and where do you think that anger comes from? Is it just that the frustration that I'm gonna always be this black male, and if you're in a, let's say, an urban community where everybody around you is poor, is it that frustration that this is my life and I'm not going to get beyond that? Or what do you think, Jeremy? I'll ask another young black male that question. He's not quite young, but black now.
I am still young.
He's a young man.
I am still young. I think a lot of it is people fight when you don't have much, or you feel you don't have much. A lot of times, all you feel you have to fight for is your respect. Mm-hmm. So anytime you feel disrespected, you do anything you can, anything in your power, to command your respect and to demand your respect. And I think that's a lot of it, And some of it too is, I was having this conversation at work yesterday. Unfortunately, a lot of males obviously, a lot of males come out of single family homes and they've been raised by their mother. So a lot of times they pick up the female traits. They're being very emotional. So, they kind of act out, as opposed to, most guys that are raised by a father or raised by some man in their life, they're not as emotional as other guys. You know, not saying they don't get upset, not saying they don't cry, but they don't. A lot of times they just not snapping to react to every little thing. You know, they've been taught. Okay, you know, be composed. You know, think about what you do before you do it. Think about what you say before you say it. You know, things like that, because you got to carry yourself. You got a lot to be responsible for. You can't make a quick decision, be going in a whim. Now you're leaving all this responsibility on the table with nobody to care for them. So if that's not necessarily in the back of your mind, or if that hasn't been drilled into your mind, you don't care. What you living for the moment. You know, it is what it is. So you have that issue. So a lot of times it's a reaction thing. So if I'm out in the street and some guy I know is from a neighborhood that we don't get along with, he look at me the wrong way. If I got a gun on me, I'll probably go shoot him or shoot at him. Should I say that? You know what I'm saying? Because I can't have him disrespecting me, thinking we don't hold our own over here. You know, and it may be a flawed way of thinking, but if that's all you know, it's not flawed to you. You know, a lot of people they grow up with that mindset, and that's the thing. A lot of times, people don't really realize, you know, people not, you know, a lot of times, you know, we're coming from pretty educated families, so our mindset is different. You know, a lot of people, they come out with a mindset is you know, people be 5 years old, but somebody look at you wrong, punch them. So if you can told that as soon as you can walk, by the time you get 16, can't nobody say nothing to you. And especially if nobody is brought into your life to kind of change your way of thinking, whether it be church, whether it be a teacher, whether it be a principal or, you know, a dean or somebody that see you getting in trouble a lot and trying to work with you, you know, you just, a lot of times your mindset is just, you know, is just flawed, you know, so you just kind of just wild, you know, and that'd be a lot of the problem.
Well, do you think that, I mean, because if it's evident in the community, it has to at least be evident in the home. Do you think that it's a lack of, I guess, discipline or parenting among the single parent to be able to develop that, you know, structure to say, no, this is not.
I wouldn't necessarily say that's every case, because it's a lot of guys that get in trouble to tell you they mama didn't play. Mm-hmm. You know, when they go home, they don't bring that mess to home. They know their mama don't play that. That's why they had to leave the house when they were 16, 17, because moms wasn't having it. Mm-hmm. I did my best with you. I worked hard trying to get everything, and you still want to act crazy? Bye. You know? You know, a lot of times the ones that do make it through when they get older, obviously, they got a lot of wisdom. They realize how blessed they were. They didn't make their mistakes, so a lot of them are obviously good mentors or good counselors, things like that. But then, you do have that element where, you know, no, there wasn't any discipline in the house. You know, no, there was nobody home. You know, if they were the oldest, they raised they sisters and brothers. So, you know, maybe the oldest might be a little more responsible than everybody else, because they had to kind of take on that parenting role. But then the younger ones, a lot of times, they're a little wilder, you know.
Or you have the other situation where maybe the mother was strict at home, but at some point, any boy that doesn't have an active male figure in his life is going to at some point, at some teenage year, is going to begin to seek that active male figure in his life.
Right.
And if the active figure is not positive, mm-hmm. or if the active figure is not prevalent, the next best thing is going to be his boy. Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, and it's gonna be his boy, because his boy is gonna help him feel, quote unquote, like a man. And so if his boy is the wrong one, or the one that likes to get in trouble, then that's going to be the influence. And even if he may not do as much dirt as his boy, at some point he's going to start doing dirt like his boy, right. which is going to begin to lead him down that wrong path.
Exactly.
And so that's a lot of it too. So the mom may be strict, but you know, at some point a man needs a man, if you will. And if the man is not in his life, then he's going to seek out the next best thing, which is another man or his boy, whichever comes first. And then that's going to be that influence. And I think a lot of them do get caught up in the trap of, well, this is everything that I'm ever going to be, you know, and so as a result, I'm going to, quote unquote, defend everything I got. And then here we are. So I think that's another thing that's just been lost. And I think that's, you know, as a community, that's another one of those things, especially when you talk about a city where men are dying, you know, faster than they die in war. You know, you gotta change that mentality. That mentality has to change, and that doesn't happen overnight. it happens, you know, 1 or 2 people at a time, and then maybe 10 years from now you see some real progress. But that's what has to happen. And I'm sure there's people in the city of Chicago, you know. I remember the pastor who was on top of the roof advocating for change in his city. So I know that they're there. And then so, you know, hopefully, you know, in years we will see some great changes happen in that city. But that's what it is. You got to change that mindset. We gotta teach young boys, no matter what your situation, that there's a way out, you know. And a lot of people say, "Oh, well, look at the president." Yeah, but the president's not a great example of that.
No, he's not.
Because he didn't come from that background. You know, he's been relatively privileged all his life, and that's not a bad thing. And I'm not knocking him for it. But when you say to the young boy who lives in the ghetto, you know, look at the president, he doesn't relate, and that's my point. He doesn't relate to the president's life, because again, he led a pretty privileged life, which is a good thing. Not knocking it whatsoever. You know, for all intents and purposes, I had a pretty privileged life myself, so I'm not criticizing. But it doesn't help to relate. You know, it doesn't help that young man in the inner city to relate to, and so he needs another young man who's made it out to really come back and really grab his attention and really say, you know, look, man, I'm here, I'm doing it. You know, that's one of the things I commend. There's a few prominent business owners, black business owners in the city, who have made it a point to build their multi-million-dollar home in the community. You know, you go off of Ivy Lane and there's several houses over there that are worth millions, but they may not be worth millions based on where they are, but if you talk about their value and you put that same home in Windermere, they're worth millions. But they put them in the community to show, and for that reason, you know, to show, hey, young black man, I was here off Ivy Lane just like you, and look at me, I'm back on Ivy Lane in this multi-million-dollar house. You know, so it can be done. It can be done, and it's done all across the city without going to play basketball and football, if you will, because that's our other misconception. Or rapping.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, or rapping. You know, people do it, but the one thing that, you know, it doesn't matter what you do, it takes work. You know, nothing happens overnight. There is no surefire way to success, but to work. That's your surefire way. Put in the work. And eventually that work will pay off, sometimes in 5 years, sometimes in 10 years, sometimes in 15, 20. But that work will pay off as long as you commit to doing the work. And that's one thing, like I said, you know, no matter where they are, whether they kind of grew up in a privileged life, they grew up in the inner city, that's one thing that we have to stress, not only to our young black males, but our young black minorities, or young black minorities in general, the females, the males, the Spanish, all of them. They need to know that, so that they can see that there is a way out, and that way out doesn't have to be from a ball or a microphone. And that's the big thing. 407-894-1680. We're getting ready to close out. You guys have any other comments you want to make?
Hey, one quick thing. I mean, since we're talking about the Chicago thing, I saw a documentary called The Interrupters. I saw it last year on Redbox. It talks about it's a organization called Ceasefire, and what they do, they have different individuals. Some receive compensation from them, some are kind of volunteers, but they go around, they're from different neighborhoods, and they actually in the neighborhoods talking to people, trying to resolve conflict between different gangs or different individuals. I mean, it's called The Interrupters. It's a really good film. It's a documentary. It's a couple hours long. It's really, really good. And it's just something to look at, because it gives you an idea if there's something you wanted to do in your community. It's a good thing to look and see what they're actually doing, because I'm telling you, they actually in the streets talking to people. You know, they talking to the guys that shot up the place last night. They talking to, you know what I'm saying? They out here really, really hitting the pavement. So I just wanted to say that.
The Interrupters, you say?
Yeah, The Interrupters.
The Interrupters. All right.
I don't know if it's still in Redbox. I'm sure it's somewhere though.
I'm gonna have to look for that. The Interrupters.
There was in reading some of these articles, there was a poem that I came across. I'm gonna have Miss McCrae read the author's name because I didn't want to butcher it. I'm gonna cross my fingers that she's gonna do a better job than me.
It's Quraysh. So I'm gonna say Quraysh. Quraish Ali Lansana.
Lansana. All right. So the last name is Lansana. I know that he's a teacher at Chicago State University. But the poem is called Dead Heat on the South Side. Dead Heat on the South Side. It says, last night, police cordoned the 4 square blocks surrounding my house in pursuit of a thug who unloaded on the shell of a gangster in the funeral parlor filled with formaldehyde and lead. Black folks scattered, staining complicated streets. I settled in for summer. The maze to the front door, running teens, smelling of weed and tragedy from my stoop, reminding my sons they are not sources of admiration, praying that might change. Not yet June, heat rises like the murder rate. Gleam and pop already, midnight's bitter tune. 15 years ago, Tahiba Jess told me about a funeral home with a drive-through window. You pull up, push a call button. Through the bulletproof glass, a friendly, somber attendant takes your request. Moments later, casket open, your order appears for review. At the time, I thought it inhumane. Now I think about the abstraction of friendship while counting bullets. Is there an extra dead? What is the term for dying again when already killing chi? And what of the corpses that walk my block in the anonymity of black skin and white tees filled with fluid? So again, it's Ali Lansana. I'll just say the last two parts of it.
Q Ali
Lansana.
That was heavy.
And Dead Heat on the South Side. Like I said, he's a professor at Chicago State University. He lives obviously in Chicago. And I saw that as I was reading an article. They actually just did the first part as a quote. And so I found the whole thing, and I just wanted to read it. I thought it was, like you said, Ms. McCrae, powerful. Just reflecting. The biggest reflection I take from all of this is we have to do a better job for ourselves in educating our young men that there's another way to handle things. There's another way to handle things, and then beyond that, we need to do a better job of really, if we're going to change the racial conversation in America, honestly, it's going to have to come from us. And we are going to have to stop having conversations with ourselves and start having conversations with other people. And when we can begin to do that and kind of bridge that gap, I think that's when we'll see real change in America. It's not going to come from any political scene. It's going to come from people engaging with other people consistently, showing that there is another side. And when we can do that consistently, at some point, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 10 years from now, but we can stop having this conversation about the racial divide in America. And that's, I advocate for that. I look forward to the day that we can stop having that conversation. Because at the end of the day, as we all know, we are the same. We have the same interest, and we all have the same goals for our families. For those of us that believe in God, we essentially believe the same thing in God as well. So that, our foundation of who we are is exactly the same. How we get there may be slightly different from time to time. What we have to achieve to get there is slightly different, but we still are the same. We want to thank you guys for joining us tonight on Real Family Talk. We'll be right here next week, 9 p.m. on Tuesday. And we'll see you then. Thank you again, people. This is WOKB 1680 AM, your urban empowerment station.
WOKB, Winter Garden, Orlando.